All right, today's learning outcomes are to model a chess pawn and also to understand the basics of 3D printing. We're also going to discuss some concepts known as non-destructive workflow and bringing in reference into Blender. Non-destructive workflow is all about creating things in such a way that if you decide to make changes down the track, these are easy to make and don't require you to start from the beginning again. So let's begin by bringing in some reference into Blender. And to do this, I'm going to just do a quick picture of a pawn on some paper, and I'm going to open my camera app. So here's my camera app, and here's my picture of the pawn. Pretty simple. I'm just going to hold that up nice and close and take a photo. And we'll just check that photo out. That looks fine. Perfect. These photos automatically get saved into a folder under Pictures, Camera Roll. Here we go. So here is my picture. And bringing this into Blender is actually really easy. All I need to do is drag this picture straight into Blender like this. Now you can see that this picture's coming at slightly on an angle, and that may not be something I want, as this reference is probably more useful to me if it's going to be straight up and down. So I'm going to delete that, and if I push 3 on my numpad, I can now bring in this image again, and I can use the G key to grab that and move that around. I want the bottom of it lined up with this green line, and I want the blue line to be pretty much through the center of the pawn. Something like this should be fine. Okay, so what happens now, I can zoom in on that, and this is going to be a really useful reference for modeling my pawn. If I middle mouse to go back to my perspective view, you can see that image plane actually disappears. There is a way we can turn that on so that it will stay. We can go under this data tab and turn on perspective mode, and now it will appear when it's in the perspective mode as well. You can see if I look from behind, it also disappears. There's an option to turn that on both, but I'm actually going to leave perspective off, and I'm just going to leave this on front. So anytime I push 3, I'll be able to see this reference, but otherwise it'll be gone, which is going to be helpful for sort of visualizing my model as I go. So now that we have our reference images brought in, the first thing I'm going to do is just save the scene, and this is an important part of non-destructive workflow. We want to have version control and incrementally save to make sure that at any point we can come back and rework from a save point. So let's just save this under my documents folder, and I'm just going to name it, well, let's make a new folder actually, and we'll call this folder chess pawn. And inside this folder, I'm going to simply name this chess pawn underscore version 01. So I've just got this letter V for version 01. That version 01 is very important. Within Blender, we can actually go File, Save Incremental, and each time we do this, it will create a new version. So the next time it will be version 2, time after that version 3, and so on, meaning that we have various save points we can go back to, just in case we model ourselves into a corner, or there's a fatal crash, or anything like that. All these things can happen. All right, so with that done, I'm going to load in a plugin now, if it isn't already, which we can do under Edit Preferences. Now, this plugin you can find under Add-ons, and it's called Extra Mesh Objects, okay? So Extra Mesh Objects. That's actually already loaded for me, but if you can't find that in your list, you can go to Get Extensions, and we can search in here for Extra Mesh Objects, and here it is. So you can make sure that that's installed, click it to install it, and we should be good to go. Now, all that plugin does is it adds a few new objects in our Create Mesh menu. So if I hit Shift A here, we can go to Mesh, and you can see we've got all of our regular objects like our plane, torus, cube, and so on. But if we come down a little further, we've got things like rock generator, torus objects, round cube, there's pipes and gears and all sorts, diamonds. But the one we're interested in is the single vert. Okay, so we're just going to go to Mesh, Single Vert, and then Add Single Vert. And all that's done here is it's created this little orange vertice in the middle of our 3D cursor, which is pretty useful. We're going to use this to design just the outline of one half of this pawn, and we're going to use a magic trick, a modifier known as the screw modifier, to create a 3D object using that side profile. Alright, so let's begin. Zooming in here, you can see I'm in edit mode currently. With this vertice selected, so here it is, that's my vertice, I'm just going to hit E to extrude, and you can see that that's created a new vertice that is connected to the original one with one edge. So I'm going to lock that to the y-axis and just move it over here and click to let go. Once again, we'll push E to create a new edge between two vertices. Going to move it up to here and click to let go. So following that same process, E to create a new vertice, move it where I want it, and so on. Alright, just going to quickly breeze through. You can see I'm not sticking to the shape perfectly. I'm trying to use, as few vertices as possible, because we have another modifier we'll use later on to create a really nice smooth surface. And if we have too many vertices, that's not going to work so well. So try and fit the shape, but don't go overboard. Alright, and then finally we get to this sphere part. So just coming up like this. And finally, we're going to make sure that this top vertice is perfectly aligned with this center point, this blue line, simply by going up to the top here where it says transform pivot point, and we're going to change that to 3D cursor. And now we're going to push S, Y, 0. And then you can see the way that works is it's essentially scaling what we have selected to 0, which flattens it along that y-axis. Okay, so if I had all of the stuff selected and I push S, Y, 0, that flattens everything. Okay, fantastic. So now that we've got our pawn outline created, I'm going to push Tab to jump back into object mode, and we're going to find the modifiers tab, and the modifier we're going to look for is called the screw modifier. So you can just click on add modifier and then start typing screw, S-C-R-E-W. There it is. And here you go. You can see I have a pawn now. It's a 3D pawn. It's not looking quite perfect. You can see the reason for that is my reference was obviously off on an angle slightly. So I could actually try and rotate that to make it a little bit better fitting. But I will have to adjust the shape of my pawn after making this change. So let's just try and find slightly more balanced angle here. Okay. Now, the nice thing about this workflow I've been using, this non-destructive workflow, is even though I've created this screw modifier, I can still go back and I can make changes to that line that I created in the first place. And that will trickle through to this 3D geometry that you can see here. So to do that, all I need to do is select my pawn and I'll push Tab, and you can see I've only got this one line to work with. Okay, so all I need to do is come in here, maybe grab all these things, I'll push G and then Y to lock to the Y-axis, just drag them out slightly. Something like this. I can move these ones around a little bit. And we'll just try and fit the shape of this curve through here. Fantastic. You can see it's not quite right on this side, but I'm not too worried about that. It looks pretty good overall. Okay, and so looking at it in 3D view, you can see that that's actually looking kind of like a pawn. And I could actually 3D print this right at this point, but there's a few more things I want to do with it to get it looking even better. So let's go ahead and File, Save Incremental. And you can see that it has indeed saved this chess pawn as version 2, which is what I wanted. And we're going to take a look at a few more modifiers that will help us to enhance the form of this pawn. So selecting it, we can go and add a new modifier. We're going to start with the weld modifier, W-E-L-D. And all that's going to do is take the vertices at the top and the very bottom and just sew them together. Because it may not have really looked like it, didn't really look like it did much, but before applying this modifier, there's, let's have a look. There's like a whole lot of vertices. Yeah, like, looks like we've got about 16 vertices all at the very top. Even though they're overlapping each other in space, I could still move those vertices around separately. But after doing this weld modifier, all of those vertices are going to become one, just because of their proximity to each other. And I can increase this distance, and you see it starts to collapse my pawn, but we'll just leave that at what it was, which was, I think, 0.01 or something. Let's do that again. Yeah, 0.001. So that's all we want with that one. Okay. And the next modifier we're going to add is called a subdivision surface modifier. So let's type sub, and you can see it here, generate subdivision surface. And instantly, after applying that, you can see my pawn is starting to look a lot nicer. It's starting to smooth out. I can come down here in the list. This is my modifier stack, and we'll find this subdivision modifier, and we'll change the levels viewport to 2. All right, and you can see it looks even smoother still. We can bump that up, as high as like 5 or 6, but I find that when we get to around subdivision level 3, any change beyond that isn't really going to be very visible. Okay, so jumping back into our side view by pushing 3 on the numpad, you can see I have made all these changes, but I can still play with the original curve that I created. And this is the beauty of non-destructive workflow. One thing I have noticed, however, is you can see that I've got this point down the bottom here, and I want that to be quite a sharp angle. But after applying the subdivision modifier, that has in fact become quite rounded. And that's simply due to the number of vertices in this area. You can see that I've got one at the very bottom in the middle, one at the very bottom at the edge, and then one up here. Versus, if we look at something like this, it's sticking much closer to the shape I tried to create for it, simply because I've got a lot more vertices through there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add some more definition to these areas that we want to preserve. We can do that by hitting Control R, and we'll come in and just drop a new vertice over here. And then I can create a new vertice on this side as well. And I can move these around quite easily just by pushing G. I can move that around. Or if I want to slide that along an existing edge, there's an option for that too. I can hit Shift and V to just slide that along that existing edge, which is quite nice. So for this one, I'll just move that closer. And you can see as I move it closer to this vertice on the corner, that's creating a nice sharp look for this. All right, I'm going to just drop a few more of these points by hitting Control R and just starting to round out the shape. And you can see that's better fitting on this side as well. This point here, I might also want that to be quite sharp. So once again, just Control R and then sliding the vertices closer to that edge is going to help me to get that shape the way I want it. For these ones, I want that quite smooth. So let's leave these as they are, but we'll maybe spread them out a little bit. Just trying to follow the shape of the reference. This one, I think I'll try and go a little bit sharper again. Something like that looks pretty good. So just go through your model, figuring out which parts you want to be sharp and which parts you want to be smooth, and creating the definition for those areas by just dropping in new points with Control R and then sliding them around using either Shift V, or you can manually move them with the G key. This one I think I'd like to be quite sharp, so nice narrow area here. And then just this final little sphere, I'm going to just adjust this a little bit, get that nice and smooth. Okay, let's take a look. There we go. You can see that pawn is looking pretty good. All right, so we've finished modeling our pawn at this point, and there's just a few things we want to do to finish up. So I'm going to tidy up a little bit by changing some names over here. Let's call this collection working. We'll also name this empty. This is our reference image, so let's just call it reference. And this vert is no longer a vert. This is now a pawn, so let's call it that. Pawn. Okay. For the sake of non-destructive workflow, what we can do at this point is we will duplicate our working folder, right-click, duplicate collection, and we'll actually turn off the working folder. So there's a little tick box there. That gets rid of it. I'm going to delete the reference from this one, and we'll rename this finished. Okay. Now, for this pawn here, we can just call this pawn. We're going to apply all of these modifiers. And to do that, all we need to do is come into the modifier stack, and next to each modifier, we can click on this little arrow and click apply. All right. Now, what I just did there is considered a destructive workflow. I've just applied all of those modifiers, and now you'll see my pawn is in a condition now where I can't really make large changes to anything, as it's all kind of like at its final form. If I ever did want to go back and work on the actual shape, I can just turn back on this working folder, and I can go ahead and go into my side view and make changes once again. So that's why we've got that working folder there. But for now, I'll just turn that off, and we'll carry on working on this final one. The reason I applied these changes is because we now have a finished version which we can export out to our slicing software for the purposes of 3D printing. So to do that, we can simply make sure we're in object mode, select the pawn, and we'll go to File, Export, STL. Okay, actually before I do this, it's probably worthwhile just doing another incremental save. So we'll go File, Save Incremental, and now we'll export it. So File, Export, STL. I'm going to export that into the same folder, and you can see it's just got the same name, version3.stl. All of this stuff should be fine. Just click Export. So here's my STL file. It's chesspawn version3.stl. And I'm going to take this into Bamboo Studio now. I've freshly installed Bamboo Studio, so if you have done the same, this is the process you'll need to go through. We'll just click Get Started. We're in Asia Pacific, that's fine. I'm going to click Skip. And the printers we want to include, we'll just go clear all. We want the Bamboo X1 Carbon, seeing as that's the printer we mainly use in the Auaha space. And we'll also turn on the Bamboo P1S. That's the printer we also have at the central library. Click Next. I'm just going to ignore all of this for now. We'll click Next. And I don't think I need the Bamboo Network plugin, so I'm just going to unclick that and click Finish. All right, we'll start a new project. We'll just click Create New Project. And here we have our Bamboo interface. Don't worry about this. We'll just click Cancel. So I'm going to select the Bamboo X1 Carbon with the 0.4 nozzle. And we'll probably be using PLA. So maybe I'll just choose generic PLA in this list. Generic PLA. There we go. All I need to do to print this pawn is to find that chess pawn version3.stl that I exported and just simply drag that into here. It's going to say that the pawn is too small. That's okay. We didn't really think about our measurements while we were modeling it. We were just thinking about the form. So the way I like to model is to think about the measurements once I'm in the slicing software. So we'll just click yes, that's fine. You can see that's coming in at a scale of 23 millimeters tall, so two and a third centimeters tall. I'm thinking probably I want that to be at least 35. So there we go. Let's see. Something like that looks pretty good. All right. Now this pawn is actually pretty much ready to go at this point. I can click Slice Plate, and this will tell us some information about how much filament it would use, how long it will take to print. It'll also tell us if there's any overhangs. So you can see if we look underneath, we've got these parts here. These are overhanging areas, which theoretically may look better if we use supports. We can turn on supports, we can take a look at that. So when we're designing shapes like this, we actually want to think about designing them so that we're not needing supports. But in this case, we can turn them on and see what it would do. And you can see, in this case, it's making a lot of these tree supports just to support the overhanging areas like I showed before. In this case, I did actually consider modeling this in such a way that supports would not be required, so I'll keep that turned off. Okay, after slicing, it's pretty simple. We can just go File, Save Project As, and we'll save this as chesspawn version 3.3mf. So a 3mf file is a file type that is used in this Bamboo Studio. And when we're ready to print, we can just click Print Plate. Now this computer that I'm working on at the moment isn't connected to any of my 3D printers, so if you want to try out this process, you can just give me that 3MF file and I will make sure it is set up to work on a printer. All right, and so that's pretty much it for today.